Peter King this morning said this about Nick Foles.
There's never been an active player the following week one who started the season on the Pine. And so I think, he says it's going to be okay. I'm going to be okay with it. It's going to be good. But he acknowledges, too, that there are going to be times it's going to be tough.
Who's he talking about, Pete?
Who is Peter King talking about? Acknowledges it's time, starting a season on the Pine. That'd be Nick Foles.
Yeah, that's right. And he mentioned that it's never really been done before. The guy who wins the MVP of the Super Bowl is sitting on the Pine. And there was a whole article on his emotions heading into next season. There was a lot of revelations in that Peter King column, which is now at NBCSports.com, no longer with Sports Illustrated. But we bring John McMullen into the conversation. We have had plenty of Nick Foles conversations here on the show. But, there was a lot in that article, John, regarding Foles. And he kind of opened up a little bit about what the offers were for him. I think what he mentioned, 2 first-round picks. So it'll be interesting to see as they get closer to the season. I know Nick's not going to come out and be a distraction, but certainly a better look inside of Nick Foles' state of mind.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of known since Nick talked to all of us where he is, and the fact is that he came out and admitted he wanted to be a starter in this league, but the situation as it stands right now is the fact that the face of the franchise is in front of him, and he understands that when Carson Wentz is deemed healthy enough to play, that he's going to play. And then the second part is, having been through sort of the bad times, Nick understands that maybe just having any starting job is not the best case scenario for him. So it is difficult. But I've said from the start, and you'll notice, Mike, everyone's talking about Carson Wentz as it's a fait accompli. He's going to be starting week one. How long have I been telling you he's going to start week one? But beyond that, same thing with Nick Foles. Anybody who knows Nick Foles knows he's not going to make any waves. So anybody trying to put that out there, that's just not going to be an issue. I don't care if it's the first time it's ever happened or not. That's just not Nick Foles' way.
Right. Yeah, and it was weird to hear that it's never happened before, that, the MVP is not starting the very next season. So Nick Foles will kind of have that going in there. But we've all kind of, come to terms with it. Now, you mentioned about Wentz. It seems that everybody thinks it's going to happen. I guess we'll find. Do you anticipate that he will be there ready to do anything next week?
Well, he was already doing stuff in OTA, so he's gonna do a significant amount of work. The question is, when is he cleared for team drills? I don't think that's going to happen right away. I think that's going to be into camp a little bit, maybe 2 weeks in or so, as far as him being ahead of schedule. But he's going to be doing individual work. He's going to be working in 7-on-7s. He's going to be doing a lot of work. It's just a matter of the next step is the actual team drills. And that I don't foresee happening next Thursday. So Nick will be the starter in training camp for team drills as it begins. And Doug kind of talked about probably as they get later in August and training camp breaks, and then it becomes a question of how do you handle the first team work. And he said he probably split it to sort of hedge his bets to make sure Carson's ready. And if he's not, Nick will be ready. And that's the reality. But long term, let's say Carson Wentz does have a setback and he's not ready for week one. Even that doesn't matter. I mean, this is Carson Wentz's team. I don't know if anybody's trying to intimate anything else. Nobody in the NovaCare complex ever has. Nobody's even hinted that there's a chance that Nick Foles could compete with Carson Wentz. This is Carson Wentz's team.
Before we get to our two teams today, they are the Jets and the Giants. A couple NFL news and notes. Let's get them to John. Brandon Cooks, 5-year, $80 million extension. He's with the Rams. Do you think that, this is a field-stretching guy, helps out Jared Goff, obviously adds another big weapon to the Rams, who we talked about a couple of weeks ago. But getting him signed to the 5-year, $80 million extension, they just add another weapon.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because
bold move, though, right?
What's that?
It's a pretty bold move when you consider, this team is, Cooks was okay last year, I guess.
Well, he was effective, and he has been effective, but that's what I was going to get to. I mean, Brandon Cooks has been a solid receiver when he's been with New Orleans and New England, 1,000-yard guy. He's performed more, and he's more proven than a Sammy Watkins, who they let walk in free agency. And you can look at it both ways and say they now have the proven guy that is going to be 1,100 yards if he's healthy, and he's going to produce at that level. But still there's that tinge of doubt because Sammy Watkins has more talent than Brandon Cooks, and Sammy Watkins has got more talent than most receivers. That's not a criticism on Brandon Cooks. So arguably, if things went right and they were able to get him back, he signed the big deal, obviously, with Kansas City, they would have been even better. So it depends how you look at it.
We're talking with John McMullen, NFL News and Notes here. A couple other quickies. Randy Gregory is back, John.
Yeah.
For how long? We got sports betting here. Are we betting Randy Gregory plays a snap this year?
Well, we talk about that a lot with players that have had multiple suspensions and multiple drug test failures. It's a good story. He's worked his way back. It's very difficult. Remember, when you've been banned like he has, you got to do a lot of things. It's not just about passing drug tests. You got to go to rehab. You got to prove to the league that you're doing the right things to try to better yourself. So he's overcome significant hurdles just to get reinstated. And I root for people like that, and I hope he succeeds, and I hope he's able to stay in the league. But the reality is, if you're a coach, you can't count on players like that. So it's difficult. And, hey, if he's out there, you just have to approach it like that. If you're Jason Garrett, if you're Rod Marinelli, if you have him, great, but you can't count on having him. And that's life.
Le'Veon Bell, unsigned franchise player, expected to skip training camp. Are we going to see a similar road to him getting back on the field as we did last year? He reported for week 1 last year.
Yeah, it's very similar. That's exactly what he's going to do. So he just, by not signing a long-term deal, he just extended his vacation for a couple more weeks. He's obviously not going to go into training camp. I'm sure he's not all that broken up about that. And then he'll enter free agency. It's interesting because he played on the same college team as Kirk Cousins. He's really taking a similar path at a different position, signing franchise tag, and then betting on himself and hoping to cash in. Now, his argument is, and he's going to try to take it to other teams in the league, is that he's not a running back. He's an offensive weapon. And he wants to get paid more because of the devaluation of the running back position. I don't think it's going to work, but we'll see. It only takes one once you get to the open market. But I don't see too many GMs want to open up that Pandora's box and sort of put an upheaval on the salary structure of the NFL. But he is, in his defense, he's a rare running back. He's probably the best 3-down running back in football. He's every bit as good a receiver as a runner. So he is a little bit different. I just don't think it's going to work.
Seahawks, Earl Thomas wants to be traded if he doesn't get a contract extension. Do you anticipate him being in Seattle?
Yeah, that's been going on for a long time. I think Seattle would like to move him, and the obvious place would be Dallas, and that would be interesting for the Eagles, bringing in a Hall of Fame type player to that defense. We just talked about them getting Randy Gregory back. All of a sudden, the Cowboys might look a little bit better than we think they are, but they want a lot, and we know how difficult trades are in this league unless you're Howie Roseman. And I don't know if they can get a first-round pick or something of that nature for an Earl Thomas, and do you really want to give up that player for a second-round pick? It's a difficult decision. Obviously, if you keep him, you got to pay him a heck of a lot of money, and I'm not sure Seattle's in that position where they're going to be a significant contender. So you have to weigh if he's worth it.
Sports Bash Live, we're looking at two teams every day chasing the Eagles. Today we got the Jets and the Giants. Let's start with the Jets, who are a mess, right? I mean, if they cleaned up their act at all there, Sam Darnold drafted, that fell into their laps. They're happy with that. But what is the quarterback story for the Team Green in New York?
Well, he's a story. I mean, he's going to be the starter. It's just a matter of when and who's going to be the bridge. Ultimately, I think it's Josh McCown. They also brought in Teddy Bridgewater, remember, and I think they were talking up Bridgewater a lot in the offseason. I think that's in hope of spinning him off, maybe in some type of trade. I think the perfect scenario would be Josh McCown, as I said, being the bridge to Sam Darnold. But, you know, long term, there's no question Sam's the guy. And I thought he was the best quarterback in the draft. I thought he should have went number one overall. But you don't have to think back very far in the Jets' history. They already had one highly drafted USC quarterback that didn't work out all that well, Mark Sanchez. But then again, Mark Sanchez made the AFC Championship game twice once. So I think they'd take that.
They've got, questions at running back. Bilal Powell seemingly has been there for a while. They brought in Crowell. They brought in Rawls. You bring in this uncertain quarterback situation, but you don't have a lot of weapons there with that in the wide receiving core, which isn't all that impressive either.
Yeah, well, Crowell's going to be the guy. He's going to be the starter, and he produced quite a bit for a bad team in Cleveland. So we'll see, but obviously, it's not like Ezekiel Elliott's in the backfield, certainly not. So that makes it more difficult for a young quarterback especially. And you mentioned the receivers, probably even worse there. If you think about production and you think about proven talent, Quincy Enunwa will be back from the injury. They brought in Terrell Pryor, who had that one season, but has really never been consistent moving from the quarterback position to wide receiver. So, there's not a lot of weapons there. And that's why I think, Josh McCown they should go with him as long as they possibly can. I always talk about it's always difficult for teams who pick quarterbacks high in the draft. There's so much pressure to get them on the field. But I would want Josh McCown out there as long as I could, just because I don't want Sam Darnold losing confidence because he's got no playmakers around.
And John, no matter who the playmakers are, of course, you still have to have somebody that draws up a plan for them to succeed. In that position, man, if you're the Jets offensive coordinator, you're like the drummer in Spinal Tap, right? You don't have a lot of job security.
And it's funny how it works with bad teams. There's constant change. And let's be honest. There's a lot of people that are surprised that Todd Bowles is still there as the head coach, but Jeremy Bates is the offensive coordinator, the quarterback's coach.
The sixth in the past 8 years, by the way.
Yeah. And I don't think it's going to be good again. So they're going to be, and this time, and we all know, when head coaches lose their job, generally 90% or more of the assistants lose their job. So there could be more upheaval coming because I just don't see how this team competes at this stage. Now, long term, I think it's a better situation because they finally might have the answer at the quarterback position. But I don't know if Todd Bowles survives the continued struggles until they turn the corner. How about Sam Darnold?
How about on the flip side of the ball, John? I know that they have, like, Trumaine Johnson is a name that jumps out at me at D, but do they have much else on the other side of the ball as far as playmakers go?
Well, they're pretty good in the secondary. I would say that's the strength of their team. You just mentioned Trumaine Johnson. He's the ex-Rams corner who at one point they franchised. He signed a big money deal. He's a very good corner. They also have Morris Claiborne. People remember him from the Cowboys. He's still a solid player. And then Jamal Adams, he's a safety. He's going to be a star in this league. He's going to be one of the better safeties in football sooner rather than later. And they also have Marcus May, another young player, and they drafted them both last year, 2017. Adams was their first-round pick. May was their second-round pick. So they have a lot of talent in the secondary. I think that is the one strength of their team. If you think about them a couple of years ago, people would talk about their defensive line, but Mo Wilkerson is gone, Sheldon Richardson's gone. The only guy who remains is Leonard Williams. So the front seven, there's much more questions than the secondary.
John, the Giants obviously had their issues last year. Is this a team that could make a significant turnaround?
I think so, because I don't think they're as bad as they were last year, where they just sort of fell off the table. And obviously they moved on from Ben McAdoo, which is probably a good thing. I think they're going to be better at the head coaching position with Pat Shurmur. So that's number one. And the fact that when you are 3-13, there's room for significant improvement. So I could see this turning into a 9 or 10 win team. And all of a sudden you look at it and say there's not many teams that can improve 6-7 games in 1 year because of where they're starting. So, yeah, I do think this will be a surprise team. I look at them now as the team most likely to be in second place behind the Eagles in the NFC East. And I think it starts with the talent they have on the offensive side of the football, and they bring in Saquon Barkley, the team with Odell Beckham Jr., who, remember, was injured last season, so he'll return. So if you're an opposing defensive coordinator and you're looking at Barkley, and we still have to wait to see. People are anointing him. I'm not in that camp, but there's no question about his talent level. And then you have OBJ, who we all know is one of the best 5 receivers in football, and Evan Engram, who's a really talented tight end. At some point you say, well, what do we do? Who do we cover? Now, the good news for opposing defensive coordinators is Eli Manning is the quarterback. So how does he get those guys to football? That's the elephant in the room. Can he play to an average level? If he can, I think they could be a 9-10 win team.
Eli Manning, 37 years old. John will be 38 if they get to the playoffs. How about the people in front of him? The Giants' offensive line has been a mess before. Have they improved on the line? Will they be able to keep Eli upright?
Yeah, they have improved a lot, so it will be better. It won't be. And it's interesting because Pat Shurmur comes from Minnesota. It was a similar thing there. They had the terrible offensive line, and they added a number of pieces and got to be average, and they had a great season. I think the Giants are trying to go that route. It's difficult to go from really bad to great, but they will go from really bad to probably okay. Nate Solder's going to be the left tackle, longtime Patriots left tackle, despite what Ben McAdoo says. He's not a terrible player. He's a huge improvement. They drafted Will Hernandez in the second round, so he'll start at guard. And then you sort of mix and match from there. And I always say, if you can get 2 good offensive linemen, you can mix and match and at least get a competent or average offensive line. I think that's the plan for the Giants.
You mentioned the offensive side. They got a lot of really explosive pieces over there. But this was a team that won Super Bowls based on their defense and how good they were there. I think the last couple of years. Now, 2 years ago, when they made the playoffs, they had a very good defense, and they signed and they hit on a lot of those free agents. Where are they now defensively?
Well, they've been herky-jerky, as you mentioned. You know, historically bad when Steve Spagnuolo was there. Then they had the big leap up, and really that was the strength of the playoff team that won 11 2 seasons ago, and then they were bad again last year. So will the real Giants defense stand up? It's probably in between. They have some good players. Jason Pierre-Paul is gone now, but they do have Snacks Harrison up front, who's one of the best run defenders in the league. They brought in Alec Ogletree at linebacker, the ex-Rams guy. They have Olivier Vernon still, who's probably their best pass rusher. And then in secondary, they have two really good players in Landon Collins and Janoris Jenkins. Eli Apple has been a huge disappointment, kid right from here in South Jersey in Voorhees. But he's got a lot of talent, former first-round pick. Maybe the new coaching staff, obviously he didn't get along. I think that was the biggest problem with McAdoo is he couldn't manage the personalities in the locker room. So if you can look at a kid like Eli Apple and Pat Shurmur can get something out of him, whereas he kind of turned off last year, maybe that defense is even better than it looks on paper.
Offensive line has been a big issue for that Giants team. I know we went from offense to defense, but that offensive line has been abysmal. Did they address that?
Yeah, they did. As I mentioned, Solder's there, so that's the big key. Now they have a left tackle who's not only competent, he's well above average. I'm not going to say he's a star, but that's a big difference from what has been going on with Eric Flowers. The big disappointment with him as a bust, as a former first-round pick. And now all of a sudden you can kick him over to the right side, which is the plan, and maybe it becomes easier for him. Maybe the light comes on. Maybe he's better without the pressure of protecting Eli Manning's blind side. But the fact that they brought in Solder and Will Hernandez, who's sort of a Brandon Brooks type guard. He's not quite as big as Brandon, but that's sort of his playing style. He's a road grader. He just dominates in the running game. He's really strong. I think he's going to be a good player in this league for a long time. So I think they at least are going to have two solid players, and that's a significant upgrade.
All right, two teams every day following the Eagles, chasing the Eagles, I should say, the Jets and the Giants. Big Blue, Gang Green, the two teams in New York. Do we have two New York playoff teams this year?
No shot at that. Maybe one. Maybe a wild card for the Giants if everything goes right.
All right. We'll see it all play out. Starts next week. Eagles at camp. We'll do two more teams tomorrow. We're looking at Cowboys and Dolphins, and then the Patriots on the big show on Friday. And then, of course, the Eagles are starting training camp next week. We'll have all the NFL news and notes right here with John McMullen. Thanks, pal.
All right. Thank you, guys.